Hello, welcome back to Cutting Engineer Designs. We are ready to debut our second video. Just to forewarn you of a couple of things, like I said in my first video, just kind of establishing things, so changing things up and trying to make it better along the way, kind of as a learning experience for myself and those of you that are following me to see where my YouTube starts off at, and then, you know, slowly making my way to bigger and better things, hopefully. But today, I'm using a new software for the video editing. So there's gonna be a lot of weird quirks in the video, so I'm forewarning you now. First problem being, when I first recorded this video, I cut it into segments and I apparently forgot to save the first segment. So now I'm recording what I'm recording now so I can set up all the instructions and everything that didn't end up getting saved. So yes, bad editing. I'm gonna look different, of course, today in this portion than I do in the rest of the video, but that's the story behind that. So as we get through the glitches, thank you guys for just kind of hanging in there with me and watching me go through these steps here. And hopefully it'll get better and better as we go through. Today's project, what we're going to do is glass etching using your die cut cutter. So either a Silhouette or a Cricut. I'm going to be working exclusively with the Silhouette software, the studio software. But Cricut users, please, please, please don't tune me out just because it's not Cricut Design Space. I think that if you follow along with me on this video and you use this software, you're going to find the capabilities of things that are going to really help you expand what you're already doing on Cricut, okay? The Silhouette software is free. You do not have to own the machine to have it. So if you're looking to download it, I will leave a link below. You'll have to set up an account. What that does is it allows you to also store your things to the cloud. If you buy the business edition is what I own, and I believe it's $79.99 maybe for the edition, and it's not a yearly fee. You buy it, you purchase it, and that's it. It's yours to keep. That has been probably the best investment I have made including the machines and everything else. I think having the business edition opens up so many opportunities for you. And for you Cricut users, if you buy that business edition, you will have the option to save everything that you create in the Silhouette Studio in a format that you can bring into your Cricut cutter. So now you have a wider range of things to do, and you can bring it straight into your Cricut Design Space, okay? So I highly, highly suggest Business Edition Silhouette Studio. That's what I'm going to be using today. When I cut the vinyl stencil for the glass etching, those of you that have a Cricut, and if you are working alongside and you decide to do that designer edition, you will do the same exact thing cutting, except for on your Cricut machine, okay? So I'm really excited to get this project started because this glass etching is my most favorite of all of the things that I've learned that implements my die cut cutters. And once you learn how to do it and you realize how simple it is, you are going to be giving gifts to everybody with glass etching. I mean, you can glass etch ball jars if you want. And I mean, that's like, you can go to Target, buy yourself a big box of ball jars, and you can label your spices and all that thing with glass etching. It's just so beautiful. It gives such an elegant touch. And then once you have that technique, you will be able to apply it to anything that's glass. As long as it's glass and it's smooth, you don't want something that's porous because you're not going to get as great of a design. But it's going to be such a fun experience. So I'm going to be walking you through step by step, and I know you're probably seeing the timing of the video and it seems really long. But the reason that is because I'm going through the step of designing, which is key here because we're going to be taking an image off of the internet, bringing it into our design, and then working with it so that we can glass etch. So please tune into this. And this is the most amazing thing ever because even though what I'm going to be doing today is going to be a LA Dodgers etching on a pint glass, the experience of learning how to bring something in from the internet and bring it into the software and work with it so that you can get a cut file is wonderful. If you know how to do that, you're going to find so much that you can do with your craft cutter now. Okay, so with that, let's begin. I'm going to go ahead and give you the list of the things that we'll need to actually complete this project. Okay, so first you're going to need some sort of a pint glass or glass. I'm using these like the beer pint glasses. You can get these, Target sells them individually. I've gone to Home Goods and bought boxes of them, you know, up to 10. So you can, any type of glass, it doesn't have to be like this. The one thing I will say, since this is your first project, try to choose something that is not beveled kind of weird, or this is, you know, the shape changes a little, but you've got flat sides, okay? I've seen a lot of pint glasses and stuff that'll kind of bevel out in a little bubble towards the top. For your first project, let's stay away from that because that's kind of hard to work with, and there'll be a lot more little quirks that you have to work out. So something nice and flat, or a ball jar, anything you have at home. It doesn't have to be anything super, super, you know, extravagant. If you want to go to the Dollar Tree or 99-cent store and buy one of those little, you know, they're like candy jars or any of those, anything glass, as long as it's smooth. Okay, we're gonna have to clean our glass off really well before we adhere anything and do the glass etching. So I just have a little bottle of rubbing alcohol and some paper towels, so we'll be able to clean. I always keep a box of wax paper in my crafting station, parchment paper, just because I'm kind of a clean freak when I'm doing stuff and I don't like to make a mess, so I always like to lay parchment paper out. Okay, so now other equipment that we'll need, or supplies. We're gonna be using glass etching cream, okay? So I'm using the Armor Etch. You may have to order this online. I bought this container from Hobby Lobby about 9 months ago, and it was the last one on the shelf. And it was all there. You can see there's all this green paint and stuff and everything on it. And I bought it anyways because I was in the middle of doing a project and I needed it. But they haven't gotten any more in stock since then. I think part of the issue is that it's labeled age 18 and over, so it has to be behind one of those cases. And I think that maybe the stores, the retailers don't want to go through the trouble of doing that. So you can find this on Amazon though. You can still buy this on Amazon or Hobby Lobby online. You can get them online, but just not in the store. I haven't seen it. Next thing I have is just painter's tape. It doesn't have to be painter's tape. It can be duct tape. It can be masking tape. We're just going to use this to cover sides of our project to not get glass etching cream on it. And if you're working in a space where you have a kitchen or a sink, some of these supplies you can just do away with, but I broke my foot, so I can't be up and about, so I need to have everything with me right where I'm at. So I have a bowl here, and we're just going to fill this bowl with water when it's time to do the glass etching. I have one of these sponge brushes. These are the ones that they sell at Michael's Mod Podge brand. It doesn't have to be Mod Podge, just anything. You're just looking for something that has a little bit of a flat edge here so that you can smooth things on. I have a spoon, a plastic spoon to help me mix my etching cream, and a sponge to clean up when we're done. I also like to have these, this is a sewing measurement tape. I love to have these. This is one of those things that crosses over right from another craft. It's always good to have something that bends, and so that you can measure, you know, the circumference of something. Those of you that maybe work with sublimation or want to do mugs or glasses will need to, you know, measure around. This is a great thing to have, even though it's not, you know, really a die cutting type tool, but it's a great thing to have when you're crafting. Okay, so now let's get into software. So we're going to use the Silhouette Design Studio, and like I said, I do have the business edition. Okay, and what that does is it gives me a couple of extra things. There's one thing that we're going to be doing here today that only comes with the business edition. Everything else you can do with the basic edition. Okay, so like I was saying, those of you who don't have a Silhouette, or maybe Cricut users, and want to go to the Silhouette website and download the software, you can do the basic version, no problem. You just need to have an email and set it up with an email and password. Okay, so we go in and we open up our program, and this is what we get when we log in. Okay, now I want to go a little bit into the setup because I know if you're used to Design Space, this seems really overwhelming. There's a lot of buttons everywhere. There's just stuff everywhere on your screen. And I don't want you to be intimidated, because here's what I'll tell you. The reason there are so many things on the screen is because there is so much that you can do. You're not going to use everything. Today, we're just going to use a matter of maybe 2 things that are on the toolbar on the right-hand side. But I'm going to walk you through and explain how all of that works. And you're going to be like, wow, this is really simple. I can do that. Okay? So over on the top, we're gonna have a couple of different things that we can take a look at, okay? We have, here's, basically this is equivalent to your Cricut design space if you're on the canvas, okay? This has a store just like Cricut. You can buy things that are already ready to go and ready to cut straight from the store. This library here, this is basically your projects, okay? This is the things that you download and the creations that you make. And then you have your send, which is what we use to send it to the machine, okay? This is equivalent to your make it in your design space, okay? So that's a general overview there of what's on the side. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's on the right-hand side here, because there's a lot here. If you do have the basic edition, you're not gonna have as much as I've got here, but I'm gonna go over the stuff that's really relevant to most, if not all of your projects and what we're gonna use today. So this right here is your page setup. Okay, this is what's telling your machine or what's on your screen. It's letting you work with the attributes that you have available to you on your project, okay? We're gonna use this one today. And then the other one we're going to use is this one here. This is the trace panel. And this is going to help us bring our image and get it into a cut file. Okay? And then the very last one is down over here. Okay? And this is what we're going to be using to apply our design and curve it for our cup. Now, if you don't have the business edition, you will not have that option. Sorry. That just comes with the designer edition, or I'm sorry, the business edition. Okay, that's why I'm saying this is worth it so much. Those of you who have worked with other projects trying to apply vinyl and stuff on curved cups, you realize it's such a pain sometimes, and this has it built into the software. Such a savior. I love it. Okay, so those are the things that we're gonna really look at or use today. Now let's go into the first panel, which was this here. This is the page right here. Okay, this is page setup. And you can leave things at a default. There's very minimal you need to change, okay? The first thing that we see here is we get to define which machine we have, okay? So just like when you go on your Cricut design space, you choose the machine that you're gonna connect to. Then you have your cutting mat size, right? Our cutting mats come in different sizes. So you choose your cutting mat size. And then finally down here on the bottom is your media. What are you cutting? What's the size of what you're cutting, okay? So today we're just going to do something on a letter size sheet, okay? Nothing special. You don't have to have a special, you know, extra large cut or anything. We're just doing this basic 8.5 by 11, okay? Everything else you can pretty much leave the way it is. You can have it show you borders and things. If you come down here, you can have them show the borders if you want, the red lines. I usually leave that on because I want to know if I'm making my design in a space that it's not going to get cut in. It helps me visualize a little bit. So let me turn those on and off just so you can see. Okay, see that red line here or this blue line on the outside went away? That's just letting you know that, hey, if you're gonna print, you've got to print between the boundaries of there. And then the red line on the outside, if I'm clicking this, you'll see the red line on the very outside is letting you know, hey, if you make something outside of that red line, it's not gonna get cut. You're outside the boundaries, okay? Very simple. Very, very simple explanation on that. So now let's go into importing our design, okay? And this is super simple. And once you learn how to do this, you can do this with any image that you have of photos, or just like we're gonna do right now, an image we're taking off the internet. Use this, this experience to test the boundaries and try different ways of using what we're gonna call tracing, okay? So we're just gonna go to our, we're gonna minimize this a little bit so that I can get my other screen up. We're gonna just go to our plain old Google search, okay? And all I did here, so I told you we were gonna be making an LA Dodgers pint glass. Okay, so I just, in my search, I did LA Dodger logo, and when I put that search in, I just came up and, oops, oh, I'm not buying shirts. I went and I put that in search and I went to images, okay? And so here's the key. When I'm choosing an image, I want to find something that has a lot of contrast, okay? I don't want anything that's kind of washed or blurry because you're not going to get as clean as of a product. So with that, when I looked, This is the image here that I like the most, okay? It's contrasted very well, very clean lines, very, you know, easy to color or easy to tell colors. I've got white, I've got red, I've got blue. Okay, so I can either copy the image or I can save the image. Okay, I'm just gonna copy it right now. I don't really need to save it. I think I may even have it saved somewhere, so I don't want to save it. We're gonna go back into our Silhouette Studio, just do a Control V and paste that there. And here we go. Very simple, okay? Now it's time to work with this so we can get it ready to cut our stencil. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna come over to the right-hand side here, and we are gonna open up this right here. It looks like a little butterfly that's kind of traced out. This is our trace panel, okay? So we are gonna go there and we're gonna click on that and open this up. And we've got a whole new window here, okay? First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come up to the top and I'm gonna select trace area. And I'm going to select my trace area, which is my picture that I just brought in, okay? And it's okay if you go outside, not a big deal. Okay, now we're seeing this here, okay? I'm gonna click on select trace area. And let's click on outline here, okay? Now, what we're gonna do is we're telling the program, hey, I want you to go through and I want you to look for your main image here, okay? So now it's doing its stuff here. I'm gonna zoom in here because when you're doing this, it's important to kind of take a look at your image to know where you wanna get it set, okay? We're not gonna mess with much today. We're just going to work with the threshold on here, okay? The threshold is this, it's right over here, okay? Now I've done this beforehand and kind of looked at it so I knew what to expect and where to go, but I'm gonna walk you through so you understand how to pick the proper value for your threshold. So if you look on your screen, you see these yellow little lines all around. This is what is going to be traced. This is a line that's going to be traced and it's going to eventually become your cut line, okay? We will work with a threshold, and as I move the threshold, you will see those lines, the yellow goes and comes. Here my threshold is really low. That means the software is not really picking up anything out of my image. I want to find a value where it starts to show the yellow around almost my whole area. Okay, and I don't want to do too much to where it's cutting out too much. I usually pinpoint a spot that I see is easy to follow. And those red lines that look like the ball is kind of flying is kind of a good thing to watch. So if you are looking around like here, keep an eye on like the yellow little dots that are showing up. As I move the threshold, they're going to come and go. Now I want a lot, but I want them to also be clear. So it's a balance, okay? But it's not so detrimental that if you don't choose exactly the perfect number, it won't kill your design, okay? Because there's gonna be some conditioning that we're gonna do to our image that's gonna help take care of that. Okay, so we've selected this and I had about 58% threshold, okay? Now what I'm gonna do is hit trace, okay? Now it looks like nothing happened, like everything went away, but it didn't. If I come and I get my cursor and I move this, here is my cut line. I can now highlight my picture as long as it has those handles around it, means my picture is selected. Hit backspace or delete, the picture is gone. Now all we have here is the image, okay? Pretty cool, very easy, right? And you can do this with anything. If you're not doing Dodgers, if you're doing in a different team or you're picking something else out from the internet, this is what your end goal is to be, okay? You're looking at this here. Very good cut job on this. It's very clear, very simple, okay? So now I want us to look at, we probably should, we could leave this here, right? If we're selling it and stuff, probably, it's a registered trademark, I'm letting you know. But I'm going to show you this right here. We're going to get rid of this, okay? And I'm going to show you how easy it is to do. You're going to go ahead and make sure that you've chosen your arrow so that you can select, and it'll look like a hand on this program. Double click here and look at all those dots. Don't freak out. It's all good. This is what we want. Okay, we're going to zoom in, and if you want to just zoom in just onto a specific portion by your mouse, you're going to use this mouse with the little plus sign. Okay, so we're going to zoom in just on this trademark part, okay? All right. Here we go. You're going to go ahead and you're just going to click on any dot, double click, and it turns red. Okay? And I can either hit delete point or I can just hit the backspace. Okay, so every time I do this, a point is disappearing. Okay? That is done. I'm going to go over to the T, do the same thing. Double click on one of these, start deleting. Done. All right, we're going to zoom out now. And then click outside so you make sure you don't click any more of your dots anywhere. Okay? So here we got a very, very clean trace, okay? Sometimes you will get a trace that maybe has a lot of little jagged like pixels, maybe, okay? And you don't want your blade doing all these little jagged cuts. So what you would do is you would go, and once again, you're gonna select your picture, make sure the handles are all around the frame of your picture, okay? You're gonna go over to the right and you're gonna hit this simplify path. And that kind of smooths it out, okay? Sorry, we're gonna, in this case, it didn't do much of a difference because we had a nice, really smooth cut that's on there, which is great. But I always hit simplify path anyways, just to make sure that there's something maybe my eye is not seeing that could be smoother. Okay, so you just hit simplify path. Okay, now this is the part that I told you, if you don't have business edition, you won't have this option here. But don't worry about it because there are ways to get around it. Because we're using a cup that changes dimensions. Sorry, we're gonna use this arrow here. Because we're using a cup that changes dimensions, it goes smaller from the bottom and it gets wider at the top. We want to account for that when we're working with our image. And business edition has this. Here's the other thing. If you're doing sublimation printing, you can also use this for your sublimation printing. Even though it doesn't curve, but then you'll know the dimensions of what you've got, okay? So we're gonna go over to this open the layers panel, click here, and it's this little rectangle here. It's kind of squiggly with the little grid inside, okay? And this is called warping. So this is, remember, this is only on the business edition. And this is, to me, this is worth buying it for me. Okay, so now we've got this warp. So we are going to be working with conical wrap, which is this here. Okay, so you just click on conical wrap. And you'll see here we have something that's kind of equivalent to our cup. This is where I was saying this tape is going to really, really help. All right. I can now use this to start applying it to my cup. I need to come over here and I need to select my image, okay? And I want to conical warp selected shapes, okay? Now I'm ready to start changing my attributes here, okay? And so your cup may not be this, maybe you're doing a ball jar. If you're doing a ball jar, be careful, you wanna stay on the flat panel. It's gonna have some curves and then it goes up on the top. You kinda want it, if you're gonna do a label, you want it straight in the middle, okay? So, now I need to measure. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways I can change my values in my measurement. I can hit these dots here and I can just drag them to change it. Or since I'm measuring exact values, I'm just going to go down to these boxes down here and change my values as I measure them. Okay, I'm coming to the top here. I'm going to measure the top and I'm measuring from one end to the other top, okay? When I measure that, I get 3.5 inches. I'm just going to put 3.5 here and hit enter, okay? Now it's kind of weird because I've got a big diameter on the bottom, but we're going to fix that. Once again, I'm going to do the same. You flip your cup over, measure from one end to the other to get your diameter. The bottom is about 2.5, so I'm going to go to the next one and put 2.5, okay? And now we need to talk about how tall it is because right now it looks kind of weird, but that's because it's measuring 11.7 inches tall. So I'm really, really picky on my measurements, part of my engineering, right? You have to be super, super accurate. So I see here on my cup that there's from the bottom to the from the bottom of the cup to the bottom of the inside of the cup, there's a little bit of space there. And I measure that to be about 1/2 inch, okay? So 1/2 inch there. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to drop my measuring tape, okay? into the center of my cup and measure the height. Okay, and when I do that, I get about 5.5, and then I'm going to add that 1/4 inch that I measured on the bottom when I measured, because I'm just that picky like that. Actually it was a 1/2 inch, sorry. I'm going to add that 1/2 inch. So we're going to take that to 6 inches. Okay, we're going to say our height of our cup is 6 inches. All right, so if you look at your screen here, you have got this warped shape now. Okay, and this is essentially what you would look like if you were wrapping it around your cup. This will work perfectly, like I said, for tumblers or mugs. If you're trying, as long as you get your dimensions right, you could be, you do pretty well. You can know what your working space is, okay, and it'll curve your text a little bit. All right, so now this is a little bit big to me. I'm seeing here, okay, here would be the edge of my cup on the top, and here's the bottom. It's kind of hitting in there a little bit. So we're gonna move our image a little, okay? To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to use the last 2 parts here on the bottom. This top one that says ABC and has an arrow left to right, that's going to make your design bigger and smaller. The one that has arrow up and down, that's going to move and position your image, okay? So you can do this in 2 different ways to change the image that you use. Once again, you can type in a value, or you can use the sliders, okay? So let me go back and let's work with this a little bit. Okay. And then I'm going to go to the next part, and I'm going to move it up a little bit because I want to see when I position it, I want to see how far it is from the top and the bottom, right? Because you don't want on a glass, you don't want to be drinking, covering half the logo. Like, it's probably too high. If it's doing that, it's too big. Okay, so I can work where I want to position it. And I'm thinking this size is good. I like the size of where it's at, okay? The other thing you can do is you can grab your tape measure and measure about how big you want your design to go. And I'm looking at this, and it's about what I would say when I eyeball it, it's about what I would want on my cup, okay? So you can size that if you want it smaller, if you want it bigger. That's totally up to your own preference, okay? Now, I know it might be super tempting because we're used to hitting enter and then apply and then close the window. Do not hit apply on the side. Once you apply that, you will not be able to change anything on this design. I usually leave it like this and I just click outside, okay? And I'm ready to go. So that is essentially where we are going to be ready to start setting up our cut job, our cutter, and send our cut job. But before I do that, I want to once again show those of you that are tuning in that are Cricut users, or even, I do this anyways, even as a Silhouette user, and you have this business edition, how helpful it is. Okay, I'm gonna move this over. Now, when you're working with your image, don't worry about this outside line here because it's not gonna cut. Okay, so I know I moved my image over and now this is over here on the side. It's off of my working space. But don't worry, that line is not going to be cut by your cutter. Okay, this is what we're gonna cut. So when I have this here, I can go over here, and remember, this is only the business edition. I can do a save as. I have the option now, which Cricut does not give you this option. I have the option to save to my hard drive. I don't need to put it on the cloud. Yes, it's great to save it to the library if I want to. I can do that. But here's the benefit of saving it to the hard drive. When I save it to the hard drive, so I'm going to go up, I've got lots of. I have an option to change my file format here, okay? If you want to bring this in and take it into Cricut, you can save this as an SVG, okay? We'll save this as an SVG, and I'm going to call this, oops. Okay, and it's saved as an SVG. which is great. This is excellent. Okay, so now I've created something. And when I go into my design space, I can bring that into my design space by just importing it like I would any other figure or graphic. Okay, that is why I love the capability of Design Space Business Edition. To me, it was really worth the extra, you know, paying the extra to have it, and it's yours to keep. It's not a monthly membership. Okay, so I can go into my canvas, upload, and see, I could also have changed it as a PNG as well. I've just by habit, and you can see here I've already loaded it before, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Upload, browse, and I'm going to go to my Cutting Engineer, and here we go. It's my Dodger Pint, and then I can open it, and there it is. You'll see the red lines just like we do have in Silhouette. Okay, so then there's your cut image. So very, very simple. That's why I said Cricut users, don't leave, right? You may end up finding that you're going to want to stick with Silhouette software when you're designing things, and then transfer it into your Cricut machine. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to get ready to cut now. So I'm just going to pause here and set up, and then we're going to use our machine to cut our design. Okay, now we're back. So my machine is ready to go here. So let me just double check my settings, make sure my Bluetooth is on. All right. So we're going to go to the software now, and we're going to set this up so that it's ready to go and print what cut what we need to cut. So let me things going here. All right, so we're going to go to our Silhouette Studio now, and we're going to start looking at what we've got going on here, because we're ready to cut our job. So let's come over, and on the top right hand portion, you're going to find where you have your send button. And when you've got your send right here, you're going to click on that. It's going to open up your cut job. Okay. So this, remember, we always keep in mind that the red is going to be what gets cut. So I always like to take a look and zoom in and take a look at this, make sure this is all looking the way I want it to look before I go and do my cut job. So for the most part, this is looking pretty clear. I'm liking what I see. It looks like some clean cuts. Pretty good job, okay? So we're going to come over here and set up our machine for cutting. And just like Cricut, we do have some sets that are in here. I tend to make sure that what I'm going to cut is going to be what I'm going to get. This is another thing that I really like about the Silhouette, is that you have the option to do a test cut. Okay, and I have basically created the same thing. I do the same thing with the Cricut machine, where I'll create this. Basically, the test cut is this little 1/4 of an inch square with a smaller triangle in the inside. And what that is a very small, intricate design that gets cut, and you want to make sure that it goes all the way through before you cut your whole entire job and find out, hey, the blade just didn't work very well. So now I've wasted all of that material and I've got to redo my job. But let's go over here and let's start little by little and talk about our setup. So what we're going to do here is, we're not using heat transfer. We need to make sure that we either choose stencil vinyl, or, like I said, if those of you are going to be using permanent vinyl, but make sure that it's not heat transfer vinyl, not HTV, because that is going to end up confusing you when it asks you to reflect or mirror your image. You don't need to do that on this stencil. Okay, so I'm going to choose stencil material. Okay, and we are cutting, and this does have an auto blade, but I don't really ever use my auto blade. I like to do the manual blade. I don't know. It's one of those things that, you know, I started off with a portrait that was a manual blade. The auto blade is nice, but I feel like it makes a lot of noise to crank it into the right position, and I just like to make sure and double check, you know, that everything is working well with my own eyes. So I have a manual blade, and then this comes up here, and it basically shows you what your setup is for your machine now, okay? This is right here is my blade setting. So that means when I look at my blade, I should have it set to the number 3, okay? When I come onto my machine, I'm going to take my blade out, which is just done by pulling this, okay? I'll let this focus a little bit. And I have these numbers here. And what I want is I want to make sure that it's on the number 3, okay? Once I do that, pop it back in, place this back, try to get my focus here again. Come here and come through. Okay, some movement here to try to focus. And then I can go back and I'm going to go load my cutting sheet now, because we're going to do our test cut. But before I do that, let me make sure that I also explain this stuff that's here. So we have a couple of things here. We've got the force and the speed. Okay, so this is very important to take a look at this. A lot of times if you're cutting vinyl and you realize that it seems to be dragging your vinyl while it's cutting, it's probably going too fast. The other general thing is also, when talking about the speed, if I have very intricate cuts, I don't want it to go too fast, okay? The force, I don't use too much of that. If I see that when the sheet comes in, it seems like you can usually see the roller is pushing down hard on the stuff that's going into the machine, then I'll take the force down. But I usually don't mess with the force too much. The speed, I usually do it slower rather than faster, because when you look at the overall amount of time you're going to save, it's not that much more between a 2 and a 9. You know, if I'm in that big of a hurry, I probably shouldn't be working on a project then. So I take my time and work on that from there. So I do that, and I leave it usually at a slower pace. Like I said, I shouldn't be in a rush if I'm going to be doing, especially glass etching, you shouldn't do this in a rush. The next thing you end up having is your passes. This right here tells you how many times you want the machine to take in your material and cut it. Okay, so sometimes I'll find that if my blade is really bad, I'll do, you know, 2 passes or 3 passes when I'm like, oh, I know I should put a new blade in there and I don't have a new blade. I'll let it cut through a couple of times to make sure it goes all the way through. Okay, now we're ready to go ahead and load our mat. So going back into where our camera is, or sorry, our cutting machine is at, we're going to load our mat, and it's pretty much the same as you would do with your Cricut. Okay, so I have my mat here, and I'm hoping that this there. I was hoping it would focus in there. I'm going to line it up just like I would normally do. And I'm going to pull this out. This silhouette has a tray on the bottom to kind of help stabilize what hangs off the edge of the cutter. And since I have so many cutters, I have some on the rolling cart, which isn't as stable as being on a table. Okay, so I've gone in through here and I've loaded my mat. And what I'm going to do is we're going to do the test cut. Now the thing with the test cut, it's not going to set your blade up to the right place. For your test cut, you have got to move your blade manually to a place that you know your design's not going to be. Okay, so knowing that, I will go back over to my silhouette software. And I'm going to see exactly where my design is going to cut. Okay, I'm going to zoom out here. And I cut my little piece of vinyl to be cut. I cut it 6 on the width right here. I cut it 6 wide. So as long as this is, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. If I do towards the end of the 5th inch to the 6th inch, it won't cut the, it's not going to cut our little test cut onto into our image. Okay, so let me come back over here, and I'm going to, sorry, I'm just going to try to pull back so we can get this going. Here's the blade here. There's just a simple, I'm going to actually show the screen here. So here you've got simple arrows that you're going to move your blade to. So your blade is sitting up here, and I just want to get a shot of the blade under if I can. You kind of want to make sure that this first blade, when you move it, is going kind of over the part that you want it to cut on. I'm going to do a view like this. I'm trying to get a perfect view of how I usually see it. Let me move it down a little bit. Okay, now I'm actually on, let me try to zoom in here. I'm actually on the piece of, right over the vinyl. You'll see the light color of the matte versus the bright white. That's the stencil. So I need to make sure that that blade is just over that white to do the test cut. And I'm going to move it a little bit over too, because I've got space. Okay, as long as it doesn't go off the matte, the bright white piece, you're okay. Okay, and now I'm going to put this back, and we're going to send our job now, our test cut. And for a long time, I used to get, I'm going to admit, I would get lazy or I'd be in a rush. And I'm like, you know, I'm not going to do the test cut. Last time I tried this on this vinyl, it seemed to work fine. It should be fine this time. And I've learned, you know what, this little bit of like 5 seconds that it takes to do a test cut to make sure that it goes all the way through is worth it. You don't want it to waste your vinyl. Okay, so you go back over to your software, and you're going to come over in this corner and you're going to hit test. Okay. Now the blade is going to go back to the original position, but it's going to go back to where you set it, and it's making its cut. Okay. It's coming through, and we are ready to remove it. So let's come back in, and we're going to do a quick check. Unload our mat, and you won't even be able to see the cut. Oh, well, you kind of, if the light hits it right, you'll see in that very corner there's a little triangle inside of a square. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that both of those pieces, let me grab, we want to make sure that when we go to those pieces, we are able to pull them out clearly and all the way through. Okay, I'm doing this reverse. So if by any way means it doesn't come off, and we can see right there that triangle slid right off. Okay, if it's giving resistance by any means, that means that you need to change your settings a little bit so that it'll cut your stencil. Now you only want it to cut through this stencil vinyl. You don't want it to cut through the white paper. Okay, if it cuts through the white paper, then it's gone too deep. You just want to be able to remove the little pieces that you've got here. Now, I'm going to take out that outside one again so you can see I just pulled in a little bit, and it's coming straight off. It should come completely off, no resistance. Okay? I will say that I'm looking at this right now, and I see a cut line sitting there from or on the backing paper. So I'm going to double check to make sure that this is not too far. And I'm seeing that as I'm pulling this, I don't like this. The fact that it's coming up, I don't like that, because what that means is it's going to overcut. That's too deep. Okay, so that's a good thing we checked this out. It's going to save me the trouble now. So now what I'm going to do is I need to fix this so that it doesn't cut too deep. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm at 3. I'm going to take it down to 2. 3, the reason it cut through that paper was because it was set too deep. Now that I've done that, I probably shouldn't get you into bad habits, but I also don't want you to be afraid of, I don't want you to be afraid of your machine. I want you to understand how it works, because the better you understand the way the machine works, the less fearful you're going to be of trying difficult tasks or projects. So when you go back over to the software, I should come back over here, and I should change this, okay? And I can do that. I can change it to a 2 if I want to. But let me tell you something. Unless you're using the auto blade, this is not communicating anything to your blade. Right now I have it set on manual. So that means it's expecting me to do the change. So even though I changed it to a 2 here, if I didn't change it on the software doesn't know that. The only time the software uses the information that's on this portion right here is if you have this right here set to auto, okay? So now, as tempting as it is to say, hey, let's just go ahead and try a cut and see if it comes out right, we're not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this up again so that we can do another test cut. Make sure that what we have our blade set as is good to go before I try to cut it again and mess it up again. Remove my blade once again. And I'm going to take the camera because I think this part is really, really important to understand. Okay, so now I can't go over the same part where I have a triangle. I need to either move it to the left or move it farther down. Okay. So I'm going to move it a little bit to the left. And I'm thinking that's probably a good spot. It's over to the left of the old cut. You can see the old cut where it's missing. It's a little over to the left. Tap it a little bit more. Okay. And then that's where I'm going to set it to try the new cut to see if our new settings are good enough for it to go now. All right, so I'll go back over to our software. And let's go ahead and send the test again. And you can see it's probably a matter of 5 to 7 seconds that it takes to verify. And this is going to save you wasted materials, right? Which we would have done had we not done this check in the first place. We would have ended up finding out that we cut our stuff way too deep. So let's unload this. And let's do this again. Once again, we do the same thing, looking at our stuff. Bring it back on the camera so we can see. See, we can get that right next to it is right next is the cut. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing again. Try to make sure that it's not too deep now. And it's a little bit trickier. Okay, so here I have it coming up. It's coming up, which is good. That's nice. I got a nice little triangle cut out of it. Let's see. I want to see what's behind that square so we can make sure that we haven't cut it too deeply. Perfect. And now we see there's no trace of cutting behind on that second cut. We are ready to go. We've got the perfect cut ready to start. Let's load this back now. And now's when the fun will start. Go back into our program and let's let it take over, and we can just now send our job. Okay. Now I will have to say this is much louder than a Cricut, and it's because this machine is much older. This is a very old machine, and I've had it for at least 9 years, if not more. So if you're going to try to compare this to something like the Maker 3, after 10 years, there's improvements. I'm sure I haven't seen the Cameo 4 up close yet, but there's a lot of things the Cameo 3 is doing that the new Cricut Maker 3 is introducing as, like, lo and behold, look what we've brought to the Cricut. And it's stuff that we have been doing on the Silhouette for a long time. So I'll leave that open. You can always shut this. It makes it a little bit quieter as well. But we can see what's going on. And I slowed it down, so it's okay. We just wait. Like I said, it's all good. If we're crafting, we're in our zone, and we're going to enjoy it. Now, as that's happening, make sure that all of those little pieces of vinyl that we pulled off in the test cut get put in the trash or somewhere where they're not going to get stuck to your product, because that could will ruin your product, and we don't want that. Any traces of old stuff we don't want. All right, so now we're unloading this babe. All right. We're going to shut this and move this guy over. And actually, I'm going to switch cameras, or camera positions, for just a moment, because we're going to now start getting to really, I think it's fun. New beginners don't think so much that it is, but I enjoy it. So we're going to do what's called weeding. And I'm sure there's a couple of giggles out there right now, so guys, grow up, grow up. Okay, so we're going to do, what that is, let me explain what that term is first, is it's removing, it's basically what the word means, removing the unwanted part of our design. Okay, I wish this is, I gotta get this into focus. Now it's really hard to see from here because this is clear stencil vinyl. Okay, but what we're gonna do is you want to flip your mat the other way and pull your mat away from your design. Okay, so we've got this here. I'm gonna move my mat over just so it's out of the way. And you'll notice that as I pulled it away from the mat, even that first cut, it all came out, which would have been really bad because we need to have a backing on our project to do the transfer of the image from here onto our cup or glass. Okay, so now we're going to get ready to weed, and this is the process where you have to really slow down and think about what you are doing. Okay, with a stencil, remember, you are going to remove the parts of your project that you want displayed on your glass. Okay, let me say that again. You will remove the parts of your project that you want to show on your glass. This is a stencil. It's opposite to what we're doing when we're using heat transfer vinyl or any other type of vinyl, permanent vinyl. Vinyl we take off and we apply it to the surface. Here, we want just the shape, the outline, the stencil. Okay, so I have this here, Cricut Bright Pad. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. Once you start to see a little bit of what's going on and start it's helpful, but even for me, it's still, even with the light, I can't see very much where to weed. So better lighting is probably a good idea. But what we do is we're taking our hook here and we're going to start around the outside. And I typically like to look at my project cutting job in front of me so that I can see exactly what it is that I'm supposed to leave. Okay, so looking at my cut job, I'm going to go again, let's see, we've got little I'm going to keep this on the screen here, and I'm looking at this here, and I realize I need to get rid of the dodgers. Now the ball gets a little bit tricky. I want to leave the bigger portions of the ball here, and I want to remove the little strands around the outside of that. This has a little bit more intricate weeding, okay? So I'm wanting to outline, I want the lines. So I'm going to take the outside round circle and these two thin lines out, okay? Leaving these guys there. I'm going to take the Dodger logo or the Dodger wording along with all of this out so that this will get etched in. I am going to remove all of this here inside, okay, the inside of it, remove those little strips. And it's going to make more sense. I'm going to show you exactly what it's going to look like as I'm pulling it out. So I'm going to find a good place to start, and the edge is always a good place, okay? If you can pick the edge to manage to just get it to start, okay? Take your time. Do not rush through this. With any of this sort of process, you want to try to keep everything as parallel to its surface as possible, trying to keep it a flat motion. You also, as you get to your design, you want to make sure that, and you know what, I just realized I'm removing the wrong stuff, you see? We're going to put that back down, and we're going to start looking for our design. So we're going to look here, and I can actually see it a little bit better, the light here. Here is the start. I'm going to turn this upside down just so it's visible for you guys. Right side up. Here is the beginning of the D for Dodgers, okay? And if I can kind of just follow it with my fingers. You can see now when the light reflects it. You see that? You can see I've pulled out the D. Now, if you notice, right down here, there's a small little piece of a stencil that needs to stay there. So when you're pulling it up, be very careful. Typically, I'll grab what I find that, rather than using the weeding tools, I just grab a paper clip and I'll unbend one side of it, and I use the paper clip to kind of hold it down. Now, once again, when you pull these out, have either a trash can or a separate piece of something to stick these on. You do not want these to end up getting stuck on your project again. There's lots of cool little nifty tools that that you can buy to help you collect the stuff, and I'm gonna look into some of those and use them online to see how they work, and we'll go through them and see whether these are good things or not, whether they're worth it. But right now we're doing minimal so that we can get this project going. Okay, now we're going to go over to the O. Now the O, once again, too, right here in the middle, there's the filling, or what would be your center of your O, okay? And there's actually another little one that came up with the O. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to press it back down and find that little piece that came up. And once I get past that piece, go through the back and hold it down so when I pull it up, it doesn't come. Now these letters are connected quite a bit, so you can follow it and just very gently go along with it. And I'm seeing a lot of little pieces of stencil that are supposed to remain. You start viewing your projects in a very different way when you start getting into weeding projects, because you realize that the more little intricate cuts there are, the more chance there is that you'll miss one of those spots. And I'm going to show you, I've got some really tiny ones in here, and I've got them coming up. And I'll actually flip this for just a second in my direction so I can see something. Something came up here that is supposed to stay, and it's stuck onto the other side of the vinyl. So I've got to go back down and kind of get it in its place so I can pull it up. Okay. Get this back into focus again. It's super slow, super slow. You'll take your time to get it all done. And I'm going through this real time with you guys because this is a very crucial part to your design. This is the make or break for your design. So actually this is worse. Okay. So here's what I've pulled out. Okay, some of it kind of touched each other and is overlapping, but this is what I pulled out. So I'm going to get rid of that so we don't get it stuck on our design. And I'm going to show you what we've got here. Okay, so when I went back a second ago and rotated it and worked with it, the reason I was doing that was the letter G. Let me see if I can get this to come in. The letter G has some really tiny little piece. It has a tiny piece there, and that came up with my whole design. So I had to go back in there, place it back down. And then there's also another one. I don't even know if this is going to be suitable, or if you'll even show. There's a small, tiny dot up here, and I can barely see with my eyes, and I can't even get it to come on the camera, but it is like a pencil tip piece that's there. So sometimes it can get very, very intricate. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do, let's go and let's start off the baseball. So let me get a view of where the baseball is. Okay, so got a little bit of the baseball coming up now. The baseball is actually coming up pretty easily. Let me get this back in focus again. Here's the baseball that I pulled out. Okay. You'll see it is like super tiny. So that came off pretty easily. Now the real challenge is going to be all of the little background that's supposed to give the impression that the ball is flying. We're going to take a look back at our software, because I want to make sure we're super careful with this. Okay, so under the ball here, we should have one here. They're coming up pretty good. Some of these, once you get them up, you can just grab with your fingers or tweezers. And then there's another one down here. Just got to make sure you don't leave any of these strips on there at all. We'll go to the next one. This is the part that takes the longest of the whole entire project. When we get to the actual glass etching and we're done, you're gonna say to yourself, that's it? It is so fast. This is the part that takes a lot of work because you have to be very patient and careful. So either if you're the type of person who gets involved, really engaged in something, and your mind kind of just gets, taken and engulfed, you'll love this, right? You'll go through it and you'll be like, oh, this is therapeutic. For people that are in a hurry and just like, oh, I just want to move on, this can get a little frustrating. This can be the frustrating part of it. But just know that what you get at the end is going to be worth your patience. Okay. So I think we've gotten all the ones that are on top of the ball. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm counting. There are 5 in the picture. Okay. So now we've got one that's under the D. We're going to pull out. Okay, so we've got that one. And under the lowercase d, we've got one in the middle. Oh, which was connected, okay. to that big stripe under it. And then there's a little piece down here. Let's go to the next part, which is next to the G. There's a little piece there. Ooh, I totally wouldn't have seen that if I was not looking at the design. That one is so tiny. Okay. And then it looks like we've got some under here. We've got one. These guys are super tiny. That one got stuck on there. One and then two under it. And then there's times like this where you're like, well, you know, maybe just doing the LA logo would have been a little bit easier, but that's okay. When you see the finished product, you're going to say this was well worth it, though. It for sure will. It's going to turn out beautifully as long as you're patient with it. Okay, let's see. Oh, and so what I've just noticed is I pulled out a piece. It popped up somewhere and I don't see it, which makes me very anxious. So let's see. We'll have to rub around. We'll see where it comes out. Put one more here. I'm getting out of focus again. Get you guys in focus. I want to try to make sure you guys can see what's going on here. It's not super entertaining anyways, but just so that if you are following along, and a lot of you, if this is your first project, you want to make sure you're doing everything exactly the way I'm telling you to do it, and want to be able to see everything. So we definitely will work on it. Okay. And I believe taking a good look to make sure that this is what I've got now. So let's get this in focus here. You can kind of see when the light bounces off of it, you see the logo much better. With that, we are ready to do our glass etching. I just keep looking at this because I felt as though I pulled out one of those stripes and I just got this sense that it popped somewhere and got stuck. And you know, I keep telling you guys, like, it's really important that you grab every little stray piece. I don't see it, so if it's there, we'll find it when we transfer. Okay. And there will be times where, you know, I'll be sitting on the couch and I was working on something and all of a sudden you find a little piece of that stencil just like sticking on your hand or something. So it'll happen. Okay, so now we've got this here, and this is our stencil ready to go. And so the next point is we need to transfer it now. We need to move it over to our other, sorry, this cord. We're going to move it over to our transfer tape because we need to put it onto our another design. So you're working with a lot of clear stuff here. So when I cut my piece of transfer tape, I always want it bigger than what I've got on my design, okay? So, super sticky, so I'm going to flip it over the other side, and I'm going to lay this down on it, okay? What you want to do is kind of always bend it a little bit so that the center touches before the edges, because once it touches, you are done. Go from the center out, center out. It's a little, I went off the edge, but that's not going to affect us because it's not the design. If you look where the design is at, we're still in good shape, okay? I got the whole design there. Then we're going to grab our tool to rub this in really well. We need to make sure that it's attaching very well because we're going to move it, and we need everything to move with it, including those small little dots that were like on the G. So I always like to do diagonal first because it's kind of like when you go over a speed bump, you know, it's smoother when you go diagonally than when you hit it head on. And we don't want to have so much force that we rip through the transfer tape. So then after I do that, then I'll go up and down, okay? And then since I was weeding it, I know there was a lot of really intricate pieces. So I'm just gonna go to those little pieces, and I'm gonna focus and make sure that that is really stuck on there. I can even go with my finger because the heat, rubbing it with the finger will produce some heat and make the adhesive a little bit easier to grab onto. Okay, so all those really little parts, okay? And then I always go through the back, and when you do the back, be careful because you're going to have more friction, so more parallel to your surface so that you get less friction. Okay. All right. Now we've got to peel this off. Another part that's super, super sensitive. As we're peeling it up, guys, you have to watch your design and make sure as you're peeling it that it is coming onto your transfer tape. So this is all really clear stuff. So that's why people will sometimes choose to use regular vinyl that has color. It helps them see it a little bit easier. But we'll look here. So once again, I'm going to try to keep this as parallel as possible. And as once I get to my design, before I pull past a certain point, I want to make sure that it's starting to adhere to my transfer tape. All right, so I'm hitting the design here now. Now this part here is why we did not want it to cut through this paper. We need it to just pick up the pieces and that's it. We don't want the back of the paper to get stuck. Okay, I see one of those little pieces on that G that was like, the one that I said is like the tip of a pencil. That one I'm not going to worry so much about because if it doesn't come, it's really tiny. Okay. So here is my stuff on my transfer tape. It's kind of really hard to see. Okay. And now we're ready to transfer it to our product. So we've got our glasses here, and this is where our cleaning, our stuff is going to have to be done. Okay. So I just grab this, and this is what the bottle of alcohol was for. So alcohol will clean the glass, anything that is left behind on it, fingerprints, oils, anything of that sort. Okay, so we're going to do that. Just spray a little bit. It doesn't need a whole lot. Fingerprints inside, but we don't have to worry so much about the inside. Once you clean it, that's probably a good thing to start handling it from the inside so that you don't get fingerprints on it. Because remember, you're working with this stuff that's adhesive to stick the stencil on, and oil will cause it to not make contact well. And we need to make sure this makes contact very well, because the reason we are using this stencil is because we're going to apply the glass etching cream to it, and it cannot get under any of the vinyl. If it gets under the vinyl, it will etch that part of the glass, and unfortunately you'll be done. You won't be able to save that project. So that's why here we take a lot of pride in taking time and doing it well. Okay, so I'm going to turn this around as it's rolling. If this happens, you can always just grab a towel, any sort of old towel or anything, and put it there so that it can stabilize it. So I'm doing it sideways, which is probably very risky because it will roll. But I'm going to grab a towel because I'm not going to risk it. I want this to come out perfectly, and so you guys can see how wonderful the finished product is. So we'll pause for just one moment. Okay, we're back now. Okay, so we've got this darker, so hopefully this will also help the autofocus. Okay, so same thing. Remember how I told you when we were working on putting this on the transfer tape? You want to bend it a little, because once it touches the glass, do not pull it up. You have a choice to make. You have a choice to make that if you do pull it up, you're going to have to recut your vinyl stencil, or place it all the way down and hope that it's as straight and as perfect as you want it to be. Okay, so do not try to save it. It's not worth it because it's probably not gonna be salvageable. So I'm gonna turn this way just so I can see my direction to make sure it's all lined up correctly. And you want to make sure that you just kind of lay it equal distance from the top and the bottom. And then straight. This stuff is super sticky. Now the other thing is, remember how I said this logo is curved? So it gives us a little bit of grace on that. Curved designs will... Okay, so I've got the middle. The center is good, laying down. And now I'm going to work my way down to the edges. Okay, and I want not necessarily that there's no air bubbles. I'm not concerned about air bubbles on the perimeter of this. I'm really concerned about this area here where the logo is, okay? So once we got that, you can just kind of roll it a little bit to get it all down. And now we're going to grab our burnishing tool, and you really want to focus on all the little edges where the cutout begins and ends. You want to make sure that the edge of that stencil is really, really pressed down on the glass. So I usually do a really fine picking of every little edge, especially if you've got little, if you've got things that bend, you know, little angles. Make sure that that little angular piece is pressed down all the way. Okay. The bigger stuff you can kind of go through and work through and rub it and brandish it through. And go all across it. And it's better to spend 15 minutes on this, brandishing it, than to assume that it's gone down well and there be parts that are not adhered well. Okay, once you feel that you've gotten everything here, we're going to go on the edges now and make sure it's attached everywhere else. Okay? And you can always, once again, if you want to use your hands to put a little bit of pressure and heat to make sure that it comes or adheres well. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to remove this. But you need to make sure, again, you need to make sure that your design under does not come up with it. Once again, as close and as parallel to the surface as possible. Pulling it down slowly, making sure everything comes with it the way it's supposed to. And if anything comes up, redo that direction, press it a little bit more, and then come back down again. And now you can probably see that little part on the G that I was saying that was super tiny. Through all of that process, it came along with it. And I know as nice as this looks already, we haven't even done the glass etching yet. Okay, now here's the thing. You can do this reverse, like if I wanted to make it where there is a whole entire glass etched border, I could have left the letters in here, made a square box outside, and then taken the square box outside and have the reverse image, kind of like a negative. Okay? All right, so this looks nice, right? Now we're ready to do the final etching part. This is the quick part, and this is the part that brings all the beauty. Okay, so I'm going to move this, and we're going to set up for all the glass etching. Now, I'm going to put parchment paper down just because I really do like to keep things clean, and it's easy to just grab that and throw it away when we're done. So now we're going to start working with all of the materials that we need for the etching. Okay, our cup is here. I may put this back just because we get good color and focus for the most part when we're doing this. Let's see. this up this way so you can see where we're at on that. Okay. I'm going to do this for just a second to see if we need some focus. Alright, so we've got our etching cream. We're going to start off with that first. We're going to put our gloves on, okay? Mind you, my bottle of etching cream has been used quite a few times. Yours will probably be, pretty good consistency. It's not going to be as thick as mine is because mine is towards the bottom of the container, okay? But before we do that, we're going to actually grab our painter's tape, masking tape, duct tape, whatever it is that you want to use a tape. And we're going to use this to tape around the edges of our stencil, okay? Because this etching cream, anywhere that it touches on the glass, it will etch. So it's better to go overkill on this than to think, because I've done this a lot of times, the amount of stencil vinyl that's around it is probably enough for me that I don't really need to tape it anymore because I've worked with it enough. But given that this is like your first project and you want it to come out absolutely perfect, you're better going through the little bit of extra taping. Because the other thing you also have to know is if you get the etching cream on your gloves and you touch something with it around the perimeter, it will also etch the glass. If I touch out here and this is not covered, it's going to etch that. So it's a way to be careful and give yourself a little bit of room, cushion room for error, okay? So we'll take that. And then finally do the top. Okay. So now we're ready. Some gloves will go back on. Grab this and hold it to kind of mix it a little bit. Like I said, if you have a brand new etching cream, it's probably going to be a lot thinner in consistency than mine is. Try to get this to focus again. Okay. See how I have this dry stuff? I will move this out of the way and throw it in the trash as well. I've got a lot of dry stuff because as you can see, I'm almost towards the bottom of my container. I've used this a lot because I have fallen in love with glass etching. Now we'll take our spoon, mix it around. You do want a well-ventilated area. If you feel comfortable wearing a mask on this so you don't breathe in anything, that's also a good idea. Okay, now here we go. Once again, if you feel more comfortable putting this in an old towel so that it doesn't roll, you are more than welcome to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to take our etching cream and we're going to focus on putting it where a majority of our open space is, okay? I always like to start at the center of the design and move around. And I just glop it on, going through, okay? Covering it with a pretty thick layer the whole way through. Be generous with it, but also careful because it will start running down, okay? And mine, like I say, mine is a little bit thick now because I've used it a lot. If you have a brand new one, it may start to trickle down the sides, which is where having that extra towel, embracing it, may also catch some of that. Okay, put a nice thick layer on it. Okay, set a timer for about 3 minutes and let that sit. Okay, it takes a matter of probably about 6 minutes to do the whole, process of leaving that etching cream on but I'm telling you, it's just beautiful what comes out after. So let me start a timer here. So that, yeah, working with the gloves is not very easy either. But I don't want to let go of this, so. And I do this process twice because I've learned from my previous projects that I get a better etching result by doing this process that we're doing right now twice than leaving it on extra. Reason being is if you can manage to let some of the etching cream sit there. I'm going to pull this a little bit forward because it's running towards edge and I don't like that it's running towards edge. If you miss any spots, it allows us to go through and kind of miss or grab any of those missing parts. And I'm going to clean this up really well and then throw this away. I've got a little bit on my gloves and there's a little bit here, but I really do want to make sure we don't have this anywhere else. I'm going to go so far as to grab another glove just to be sure. Now while that's sitting, what you can do is with one of those sponge brushes, get it just a little bit wet and squeeze the water out of it, okay? And this is going to make a lot of sense when you see what we're doing right now on the next step. This is going to help you get a good finished product. Got my paper towels going. I got lots of these paper towels. Watching this dripping down the side. If you do have a brand new bottle of the etching cream, though, you don't need to mount it as much as I did. Like I said, mine is very thick, so I kind of have to do that at this point. But you're going to see how this allows you also to reuse your etching cream. So one of these will last you a really long time. Okay, so we're just about at our 3 minutes. Always work from your outside in towards the center. Stop at the middle, grab your brush, clean off what you've got on here. You can use this again. Start from the other side, which is good. You kind of feel like when you're eating ice cream on a hot day, like it's like dripping down the side. You want to get it before it falls, all right? So again, to clean that off. Take this excess, and we want to make sure you don't press too hard, because remember, if you press hard, you will start shoving this under your stencil vinyl, and you don't want that. You want it just in the spaces that you've cut out of your stencil vinyl. Okay, so now we've got a majority of the bulk load of this. What we're going to do is we're going to go back over with our brush and just light coat. So we're making a light coat on it so that if there was anything that was missed, we fill that gap, and we're just leaving a really, really light coat now. And at this point, it shouldn't run down. You should have such a light coat that it's not going to run down. And then we're going to leave it another 3 minutes. Okay. So I'll start another 3-minute timer. And then I'm going to throw this into the wet water. And while that is sitting there, you can use that brush again. Actually, you can leave that brush there, let it sit in the water, and now you're going to grab your sponge and get the sponge wet, and make sure that you wring it out so that it's not too wet. You don't want it sopping and dripping, okay? Because we're going to clean this up now. This is the final step. This is our clean off now. The next step is pretty much the end to get our result. So we want to make sure that our sponge is a little wet and ready to go. We've got about 2 more minutes. Usually during this time is where I start to put all my materials away. The other thing about really having that bowl of water now is I just stick everything in that bowl. I'm going to stick this spoon in the bowl and let it sit there and soak. We'll leave our alcohol here because we'll do a final cleanup of the cup with alcohol when we're done. And once again, like I've gone through this process and perfected it to the point where it's not too messy, doesn't leave a whole lot of mess for you. Got about 1.5 minutes left. I am so excited for all of you that are trying this to see your finished product, because you are just going to be hooked. You're going to be glass etching your windows in your house. Like you're going to see it's going to be so exciting. So just a word, remember that when we did the stencil on this, we did not mirror our image, okay? We didn't mirror the image. And the only time when you're stenciling that you'll mirror an image is if you decide to glass etch a cutting board, a glass cutting board. Usually you don't want to do it on the top of your cutting board. You do it on the back, the underside. So when you do it on the underside, then you'd have to mirror your image. But you're transferring your design and you don't need to mirror your image, okay? Those are the 2 questions whenever you're working with any sort of vinyl. The 2 questions you should always ask yourself is if you need to mirror your image, and think about whether you're doing it outside or inside. If you can answer those 2 things before you start your cut job, you'll keep yourself in the clear from wasting a lot of material. All right, just about hitting that 3-minute mark, and we're getting ready to see our final product. That's our timer. All right, gloves still on. Grab your wet towel once again from the outside into the middle. You don't want to get any of this on the outside. Very gentle, not a lot of force. Once you see that you got a lot of this coating on your sponge, go ahead and put it into your bowl and rinse it. Bring it out again. Once it gets diluted enough, from wiping it, it's not so detrimental if it gets on the other parts of the glass. So that's why rinsing it off a lot of times before we do the final removal of the stencil is probably the best thing you could do. Take your time, be patient. Never do these things if you're going to be in a rush, because it's going to ask for some flaws if you do it in a rush. Okay, so you can see it's pretty clean now. At this point, we can put our sponge back in our water. We can get rid of our gloves, because if you have your gloves on when you're trying to take the tape off, the tape will stick to the gloves and it makes it a mess. Tape is usually pretty easy to take off because it's kind of wet now. Piece. Don't need to worry about it ripping or anything. This is all from here on out. Everything is trash. Once you do this, you will head out to Home Goods, buy just about anything that is glass there, and just start having fun with it. Think about it, with a glass like this for $2.50 a glass, if it botches up, it's not a big deal. $2.50. Try it again, Lessons learned. Think about, ask yourself, that engineering process comes in, into my mind, like, okay, why did it fail? What could we do differently? And try it again. It's made me so excited. So this you don't have to be as gentle with. If it rips, not a big deal. We're getting rid of this. You just got to be extra, not careful, but you got to pay attention to those little insides of the the letters again, because you want to make sure you pull all of that stencil out from those places. So everything that was a pain to weed is going to be a pain to take off the vinyl now. And it comes up, for the most part, it comes up really easily. Starting to get to the clear area. And hopefully you, if you are doing your own project, you are starting to get excited at what you see. I see this little D here. There's one of those little pieces. It really doesn't want to come up. Now mine will get a little frosty, powdery look on it because once again I'm towards the end, but I'm going to show you how you clean that up. It's not ruined, it's not a flawed job, it just needs a little bit of buffing out. And I'm going to show you how to do that because at some point hopefully you will get to the bottom of your etching cream. And I don't want you to feel like, oh, I still have a quarter of a bottle and I'm just going to throw it out because it keeps making my glass etching look smudged. It's not at all. Okay, I think I've gotten everything. So we're going to clean it up. And yours, if like I say, if this is the first time you've used the glass etching, yours probably looks pretty clean as it is. But I'm going to show you what mine looks like because of, you know, the dryness of my glass etching cream and the number of times I've used it. So you may not even be able to see very much. There is some parts where it's really now here. There's some, looks like powdery white on it. Okay, so that's a real simple fix, and we just spray alcohol on it and you just get that paper towel and you rub it. And you want to do this anyways. You want to clean it up when you're done anyways. To take any of the remaining residue. If you want, you could take it to a sink and you could rinse it and wash it. Like I say here, oops, and I realized I forgot the little portion of the E sitting here, still sticking in there. That's the other thing, to make sure you've gotten all the pieces out of there. Now, let's see. I still have quite a bit of that powdery feeling or that powdery look here. So that you get the alcohol and you just keep buffing it out with a paper towel until it goes away. But once again, I don't think your product will have that. If you've got a brand new etching cream, you probably will not get that powder. Look at this, it's so beautiful. Love it. Sorry, some of you may not like that noise. Very sorry. It does take a little bit of force to get it off. All right, look at that, guys. Oh, think about that at a game. I feel that with some nice cold beer, right? Watching the game. Oh, so good. And I still have some of that white powdery, so I'm going to rub it out a little bit more. Like I said, you could just take it to the kitchen sink and wash it out if you want, but it is good to go. The camera just doesn't want to focus now. Just show the beauty. I am so excited. And oh, I know. Let's do this. Let's see if it likes the darkness. And I see, you can still see I still have some of that powdery looking. And at this point, like, I'm probably using a lot of time to try to buff it out, so it's probably time for me to just get a brand new container of etching cream. Just keep running nice bounce circles. Well, I won't buff it completely out because I know it makes a lot of noise and that may make some of you guys cringe. But this is what you get. And it's all cleaned up and ready to go. Looks really, really good. So hopefully we're doing a project on your own as well, working on this, and it came out just as good for you because I've actually taught a class doing this and they had a great success on their first glass etching, much better than my first glass etching. So if it didn't come out right, if you have parts inside of letters where you can tell the cream got under, that just tells you the next time you do it, make sure you really focus on the stencil and rubbing it down really, really hard towards those little edges right there. But for the most part, if you work through it well, you will get a great finished product. Okay, so now you have your finished project, and most of all, thank you for sticking through the video if you watch the whole entire thing. I know there's so many little bugs that I have to iron out as I get this whole YouTube thing established. But I really hope you enjoy your projects. Look down below, I'll have a list of projects for you, as well as a quick little typed up sheet of the instructions for you to do the modification of bringing in the file and tracing it. And then leave some comments below. If you have any questions or something didn't work out well or it worked out wonderfully, let me know how it went for you. I'd love to hear your stories. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below so that you can get notifications when our next video is coming up. I'm going to post a couple of really good videos in the next couple days because all the Christmas gifts have been given, so I can now reveal stuff online. So hit that subscribe, hit that like, and until next time, we'll see you later from Cutting Engineer Designs. Bye.